Marjorie Taylor Greene just announced a bill that gender-affirming care for trans teens is a Class C felony nationally. That's what she's going to go for. It's not going to work, by the way. Tucker Carlson says he will pressure every Republican to join. It has no chance of passing the next 2 years, but this is their plan if they win in 2024. Great. I will also add Tucker Carlson continued the stochastic terrorism campaign against Boston Children's Hospital on a segment. The bill would give 25-year prison sentences for gender-affirming care. They're literally doing the abortion thing to a T to trans people. But because it's trans people, it's going to have less defenders, I guess. Yeah, I will never look at another Sam Harris video for a while. Okay, don't worry. Okay, let's see. Tucker Carlson also is back, and he's demanding the Republican center the midterm campaign's message around the white supremacist great replacement theory.
If inflation were the salient issue here, the generational...
How many people called that this was coming next? Dude, I've been saying this for years, okay? Every time someone brought up like trans people playing in, athletic competitions is wrong. I don't care about them, but I just think that that's unequal and unjustifiable. Every single time that conversation came up, I told them that's not the main conversation. The real conversation is about trans people not existing. That's always going to happen. That's always going to happen. They're going to try to fucking push for that. They're going to try to push for that. And then also, they're going to push for gay people not existing in society either. They're going to say gay people are groomers. Gay people are trying to turn your children gay. And if the trans thing passes, which I hope it doesn't, but if the trans thing passes, next up is gay people on the chopping block. Straight up.
Issue of this campaign season. But it's not. Inflation's terrible. It's making people poorer. We actually could tank the US dollar. These are all big, big problems. But changing the population of the United States, allowing people to be murdered in the street, letting drug addicts live...
By the way, new Ipsos poll showed that 60% of Americans believe that there is an invasion happening in the southern border. That's a wonderful fact that I must add here while talking about Tucker Carlson's great replacement theory rhetoric. Tucker Carlson knows how to read the room very well. He's a really good propagandizer of racial agitation, racial agitprop. And for that reason, he's probably going to ramp up the great replacement rhetoric a lot more aggressively now that he knows that 60% of Americans believe that there's an invasion happening in the southern border. 60% of Americans. 60% of Americans.
On the sidewalk and sending them crack pipes? That will change everything forever. These are offenses against the most basic rules of any civilization. And the most basic of all is you reward people for doing the right thing and you penalize them for doing the wrong thing. If you start doing the opposite, then everything falls apart. And everybody knows that. So why not just say it? Why not just say that? Don't be embarrassed. Just say that. If inflation.
If inflation. That's from today. A majority of Americans see an invasion at the southern border, NPR poll finds. Invasion rhetoric is resonating with many Americans. Completely true or somewhat true. Majority of Americans say there is an invasion at the southern border. Overall, it is 28% that say completely true, 25% that say somewhat true. Okay? Amongst Democrats, 12% of Democrats say there's a southern border invasion. They say completely true. 29% of Democrats say that it's somewhat true that there's an invasion at the southern border. 51% of Republicans say that it's completely true that there is an invasion happening in the southern border. 25% of Republicans say it's somewhat true that there is an invasion happening at the southern border. They polled 1,000 people. That is an adequate number of people to poll. What the fuck is wrong with you? That is literally a decent sample size. Shut the fuck up. Why do people constantly and consistently say that 1,000 people being polled is not valid when it quite literally is a valid sample size? What, you think these guys that literally do at Ipsos, you think the motherfuckers at Ipsos don't know what the adequate sample size is? People think a poll has to poll like 330 million people or else it's just not adequate. They need to poll 100% of Americans. Anyway, so Tucker Carlson's doing that. Here is the Trump losing Alex Jones take.
Support him a few years ago, even though I disagreed with his warp speed, because I thought that we had to keep him in office because of the nightmare scenario if Hillary or Biden got in, back before they were officially running. But that said, I am supporting DeSantis. DeSantis is just gone from being awesome to being unbelievably good. And I don't just watch a man's actions, as Christ said, judge a tree by its fruits. I can also look in his eyes on HD video, and I see the real sincerity. Pig-headedly support him a few years ago, even though I disagreed with his warp speed, because I thought that we had.
That's right. He said, Donald Trump's smelling a lot like sulfur to me. He's smelling a lot more like sulfur than he did before, okay? Dude, there was so much more that I wanted to cover today that I'm not going to be able to get to.
See that the agency has made serious mistakes during this COVID pandemic, which has killed more than 1 million Americans. The U.S. has by far the highest COVID death toll in the world. Dr. Rochelle Walensky is now calling for fundamental change to restore the public's trust as now monkeypox spreads and COVID numbers remain high in some places in the country.
Number one, baby. 13,000 cases, baby. Number one for monkeypox.
She spoke to our Dr. John LaPook in an exclusive TV interview last night.
Was the agency up to the task of handling this pandemic?
I think our public health infrastructure in the country was not up to the task of handling this pandemic.
Dr. Rochelle Walensky is vowing to revamp the CDC after its response to COVID-19.
We made some pretty public mistakes, and we need to own them.
This admission came
It's going to be real funny when her admission is that we didn't open up the country sooner. They're like, yeah, we should have just never done anything.
after the CDC received the findings of an external review she ordered of the agency. The CDC says the review found the agency's COVID guidance was confusing and overwhelming.
Why did you go ahead and commission this external review?
You know, I think it's really important to understand the great work of this agency.
This, for the record, this came 1 week after they said you shouldn't test kids in school anymore. So understand where the agency is moving towards with respect to COVID guidelines. This external investigation's findings came 1 week after the CDC basically said, hey, if you're a kid and you have COVID, like, fuck it, YOLO.
But also to admit to areas where we needed to improve. We owe that to the American people.
The CDC says its new objectives are to share scientific findings and data faster, translate the science into practical, easy-to-understand policy, and develop what Dr. Walensky called special forces to fight future pandemics.
We do now have an agency that has intense scientific expertise at almost every area of public health, which is a real gift.
They're making the CDC militant. They're going to come in and vaccinate my dick to make sure it's a gay dick. I knew it. I knew it.
And what we really need to do is raise those folks outside of their silos.
Do you think they're up to the task of now changing their whole culture and thinking of themselves more like special forces that can be deployed wherever they're needed?
I have no doubt that they're up to the task.
Many say it can't come soon enough as monkeypox cases spike in the U.S. Last week, the FDA authorized a plan to stretch out the nation's limited supply of monkeypox vaccines by offering a way of administering shots at 1/5 the dose while eliciting a similar immune response.
Do you think the criticism that the CDC has been moving too slowly in dealing with the monkeypox outbreak, those criticisms are valid?
We at CDC still have not seen all the immunization data that we need to be able to see in order to mobilize vaccinations across this country. Part of those challenges are similar to some of the challenges that we had with COVID-19, that we don't have full line of sight on all the data that we need in order to make real-time decisions.
Dr. Walensky says it remains a global fight to get monkeypox under control.
We always have the possibility of receding if we don't have it contained around the world. Back to the old statement, no one is safe until everyone is safe.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Dr. John LaPook.
Landmark lawsuit.
I still kind of don't understand what they mean by this. Like, what direction are they going with? Are they going in the direction of the CDC being, like, more chill? Or are they going in the direction of the CDC being more aggressive? It's just PR bullshit. Yeah, we went and conducted an external review with Pinkerton Goldman Sachs Incorporated to find out that the Visa MasterCard Pinkerton Goldman Sachs Incorporated review that was sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce decided that the CDC needs militant agents in an effort to ensure the chronic joblessness in this country. So the CDC is now going to come knocking down your door if you don't go to work because you have a little, ouchie boo-boo. They'll break your door down and force you to go to work at gunpoint because people need to get their fucking Slurpees, okay? And those Slurpees aren't going to make themselves, bitch. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you test positive for COVID? If you don't go to fucking work tomorrow, I'm coming to your house with the National Guard, okay? Biden admin is also going to stop buying COVID-19 vaccines, treatments, and tests as early as this fall. Fuck yeah, baby, because cleaning teeth with a folded piece of paper like a true Turk dad, mashallah. Yeah, exactly. Or they're doing a task force to ensure that, like, if you get sick, you have to go to work. Actually, it's better if you go to work when you're sick. And if you don't go to work, you go to jail. The gabagoo is on the counter. They're also coming after Donald Trump's organization for tax fraud over the course of many years. Up to $2 million of fraud, as a matter of fact. Donald Trump's CFO pled guilty today. Let's take a look at what happened.
Big development now in another high-profile case we're following involving the former president. This one involves the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and Alan Weisselberg, the former longtime chief financial officer of the former president's namesake company. He is expected to plead guilty tomorrow to a 15-year tax fraud scheme. That's according to a source familiar with the matter. Now, the terms of the deal, they are still being finalized. Weisselberg may end up testifying against the company. That's despite the fact that he's not entered into a cooperation agreement with prosecutors. I'm joined now by CNN's Kara Scannell, who's been following it. What exactly is he pleading guilty to, and what does that mean that he's not entering into a cooperating agreement?
Right. So Alan Weisselberg was indicted last year along with the Trump Organization, and it was in a 15-count indictment going back 15 years that he was involved in this off-the-books compensation scheme, basically not paying taxes on some corporate benefits he got, like a company apartment, car leases, and
so the Trump Organization would pay his car lease, would pay school tuition for his grandkids or things like that?
Exactly. And then he wasn't paying income tax on that. So he's going to admit to all of this tomorrow, according to sources. He will plead guilty to the entire indictment, and he's agreed to testify at trial. The Trump Organization, the corporate entity, no individual, is going to trial in October on these charges. Now, they have had testimony from other people. They've had an accountant who has worked with the Trump Organization, who has testified before the grand jury, but this will be a live witness. Will be Alan Weisselberg, the longtime CFO. He's been with the company for 40 years, going to testify against the company if it gets to trial.
Is it just testifying in this particular scheme against the company, or the company and other things they may have been involved with?
Well, that's the thing here. This is just for his testimony in the tax fraud trial. You know, remember, he got charged with this because prosecutors were trying to put pressure on him to cooperate in their much broader investigation into the Trump Organization's finance and whether they misled lenders and insurers. But Weisselberg was not willing to cooperate with that investigation. So they was indicted a year ago, July. He's on the cusp of the trial in October. He just lost some motions to dismiss the indictment. He's now come to terms and said he's going to cooperate with this investigation. And for him, he gets some certainty here because according to this deal, he would serve 5 months in prison with time off for good behavior. We're looking at 100 days. But these days would be served in Rikers Island, the notorious New York City jail. But he gets the benefit of not having to go to trial, to potentially get convicted, to face anywhere from 1 to 3 years in prison to as much as 15 years in a New York State prison. So that's kind of the calculus for him. He gets some certainty. He knows he will serve a limited prison term, and he will offer this cooperation.
And what's next for the criminal investigation in New York? Is that still ongoing?
Well, it's still ongoing, but as you probably remember, the previous District Attorney Cy Vance had authorized his prosecutors to move forward with an indictment or to seek an indictment before the grand jury against the former president. The new District Attorney Alvin Bragg came in, reviewed the evidence, and said he didn't think there was enough there. One of the issues is they didn't have a cooperator. They didn't have someone like Weisselberg who was willing to tell the story behind the numbers. That investigation has slowed down. Sources tell me it's still ongoing, but there remains a lot of questions of what could they get that would satisfy the new DA that they have enough to bring an indictment when they didn't after already more than 3 years of investigating?
Kara Scannell, I appreciate it. Thanks. Joining me now to talk about it, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams. Why would they do a plea agreement with this guy if he wasn't going to cooperate in any criminal trial.
Now, believe it or not, Anderson, going to trial is really just a matter of resources and costs and benefits that prosecutors have to think through. And does it make more sense to go to trial and run the risk of losing and spend the resources of your time, your energy, your prosecutors, or guarantee that you get a conviction and someone going to jail? It sounds sort of odd to the
But it sounds like prosecutors kind of blinked. They decided, well, we'd rather get the conviction than
nothing, and lose, and maybe lose, because so much of what would have been on trial here is subjective. Now, some of it, there would be financial statements and records and so on. But this question, this is what Kara was talking about a little bit earlier, when we're talking about compensation or tuition being paid.
Plea bargains are the backbone of the American court system for the reasons that he just adequately explained. What is it, like 90% or something? Yeah, remember when I interviewed Trump's other lawyer, Michael Cohen? 97%, 99.7%? That's how it works.
Paid, there's a question of, well, maybe this might have actually been part of his compensation package, and a jury could have been tricked by that, or at least been confused enough by it to not get a conviction.
Rudy Giuliani testified before a grand jury in Georgia. The fact that he is a target, has been informed he's a target of this investigation. How does that influence his testimony?
So here's the thing. So many people think they can just...
Wait, you guys don't remember? I did. I interviewed Michael Cohen. Yeah, or rather, funnier than that, Michael Cohen interviewed me on his podcast from his house arrest. He has a house arrest podcast, and he interviewed me on his house arrest podcast.
Talk their way out of testimony, and maybe, and we know, we've seen Rudy Giuliani publicly, maybe he thought he might have been able to save him.
Most un-American thing that you can do. Same with these anti-protest bills. It completely goes against the First Amendment. It is the most un-American thing that you can push for, and it's going to be very damaging. A lot of Republicans were doing this before Donald Trump and pulled these anti-protest bills where you can drive into protesters with your car, and that would make it legal to do things like that. After the terrorist attack in Charlottesville, after the Unite the Right rally. Same with these anti-protest bills. It completely goes against the First Amendment. Yeah, I did that shit. Bro, I've been around the fucking block. Okay? All you young ones have no idea. You're like, you're new fans. You don't even know. I've done debates, I've done interviews with so many motherfuckers.
By talking. If his lawyers were smart, they probably advised him to just keep his mouth shut because of the tremendous risk of jeopardizing his own rights if he does ultimately get charged with a crime.
So he could have just pled the Fifth during this?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, and oddly enough, that can take 5 or 6 hours, because every question other than, what's your name, Rudy Giuliani? Like, so for instance, how long have you served as Donald Trump's lawyer? I plead the Fifth, because that could come up in a conspiracy trial. Every possible fact. And so hour after hour, they were probably going through every question.
Can they just do a blanket, I plead the Fifth?
I mean, they could, but prosecutors have a tremendous amount of information, and they want to get him on the record, at least pleading the Fifth. But again, it seems...
Honestly, though, a lot of you in here right now, 4 years, 5 years down the line, when Andrew Tate is the president of the United States of America, will probably look back and go, remember when you debated the president of the United States of America? Squashed the beef with Logan Paul and Jake Paul and ran on a Tate Paul ticket? Yeah. How crazy is that? And now he's the president. Remember, we used to make the Bugatti jokes.
Odd, but and it can take an entire day of doing that, and we saw that with the president quite recently.
There is a federal hearing tomorrow.
Yeah, 5 years later, and women are made illegal. Yeah. Andrew Tate becomes president. First order of business, executive order, women are illegal. Boys only.
Tomorrow in Florida regarding the unsealing of the affidavit that was used to get the search warrant in Mar-a-Lago, which point out CNN and other news organizations have been pushing to try to get it actually released. The Justice Department obviously does not want it released. What's the likelihood that it would get released?
I would say highly, highly, highly unlikely that it ever gets released, because of the fact that, number one, you want to protect the the rights of innocent people who are named in it. Number two, you want to protect your evidence. Number three, you want to protect your agents and the work that they're doing. Usually courts defer to the Justice Department or prosecutors when they say we will jeopardize our case or our investigation here if this becomes public.
And the Department of Justice had already said that. They've already said, look, this is going to deter any witnesses.
So the judge would have to supersede that in effect and say, you know what, Justice Department, you don't know what's best for your own cases, and the fact that there are innocent people here. You know what? There's enough public interest here. Let's make it public.
Could the judge rule that they would redact, any agents' names, any witness names?
Okay. If they redact this document, Anderson, it's basically going to be a search on whatever date, August 5th or whatever, black box for 5 pages, 20 pages.
Elliot Williams, appreciate it.
Thanks, Anderson.
We've got a startling admission from the head of the CDC that the agency has made